Just going to click through some pictures of the area I live in while I discuss a subject that seems to be a problem for me. Um, I come from Western North Carolina, Asheville area. It's quite the place. But what I wanted to speak about was uh, manually flying an RC airplane and why I seem to be so hip on doing that. And this comes from long before uh, drones existed, flight controllers existed. Back when I was a teenager, which was 50 years ago, people were flying RC airplanes, and there was no such thing as even a KK2 board. There was no stabilization whatsoever. It was a small battery pack and an RC receiver. That was the whole extent of the electronics in an RC airplane. They were glow fuel engines, etc., etc. That's where my desire for flying in manual mode comes from. I'm not so much paying exact attention to the documentation in ArduPilot that goes through the steps of maidening an airplane, although I have recommended to people that they do so. I can see now why they may have questioned their own doing so. Uh, and I'm sure that's to cover their butts. To and I can completely see it. Raw RC airplanes are manual mode only. Again, prior to uh, the advent of the flight controllers. Oh man, Pilot Mountain, by the way, near here has a bad forest fire going on right now. I hate that. Um, so that's where my desire to fly in manual mode comes from. Sure, I know the ArduPilot. When you go in and look at maiden in an airplane, that's what they're talking about and telling you to do. I am going to keep manual mode on my radio forever. It's so that if there's a flight controller failure of electronics, flipping it into loiter to park in the sky when the flight controllers failed is not, you know, might not work, but it's one thing you might want to do instead of loiter if it seems like the ailerons have gone all the way to the right or some such as that. Uh, Maybe flipping it into manual mode will let it pass through the signals from your radio and you can fly. That's my way of thinking on electronics. My understanding of electronics also says if it fails, it might not be able to pass through the signals anymore and will stay ailerons completely to the right. You can never tell. It's a possibility that I think I'm going to keep manual mode on the radio for. If the plane's acting funky, flipping it into another controlled mode might just result in the same funkiness, whereas manual may. And I know this is going to be one shot out of 1,000, but I still think it needs to be there. Plus, yes, aerobatics is one of my favorite things to do with airplanes. I got grounded in the Navy in real airplanes for doing accelerated stalls in a Cessna 150 out solo. Another one of the instructors saw me doing it and turned me in. I got grounded for 2 weeks. Uh, Accelerated stalls aren't really recommended for Cessna 150, even though they are or were done while I was taking my instructions. They made me do accelerated stalls. I just thought they were fun as hell. If you touch the rudder just before the stall breaks, the plane will flip over on its back immediately, roll 180 onto its back, And then you have to get the carburetor heat on and the throttle off as low an RPM on the motor as you can to bring it under and back to level flight. And in a Cessna 150, if you're not good at it, you'll rip the wings right off. But that excuse that I was practicing what my instructors had told me didn't fly. This is Linville Falls. Oh, Linville Falls. That's not either. That's Looking Glass Falls. That's very close to my house and very close to where I go to fly. So that's where my desire for flying in manual mode comes from. Just the historic days of RC. And I don't know. I've never flown a flight controller on an airplane before. I do know that recently with the flame wheel, when I was going return to launch, it would come back to, maybe I'll attach the video to this. You can find it. Just look up flame wheel, my last flame wheel video. It kept trying to fly off on me here at the house. And when it was flying back to return to launch point, it was fine. When it got there, it was rocking back and forth, needing tuning, in my humble opinion, because I hadn't got to that. It was in a maiden flight, and it was also at 200 feet. It was almost turning upside down. It was rocking around so much, at the return to launch point at the top. It was just all over the place. And the only thing I could do with it at that time was pull it back into manual mode. Of course, I wasn't at mid throttle, so it tried to go up in altitude and was a handful there for a while. But I ended up in manual mode, getting it down from the 300 feet it got to, and I kept pulling it back out of return to launch, return to home, and finally got it on the ground successfully. Manual mode saved my butt that day. I would assume that manual mode would be that way for everything. Several of my airplanes in the room right here do not have any kind of stabilization on them at all. I have to fly them in manual mode, and I have. The Nano Skyhunter has nothing. One of my Bixlers has nothing. I've flown them several times. So it's a personal desire from my teenager years to fly in manual mode, along with the recommendation on the flight controller software recommending starting out in manual mode and then attempting a controlled mode after that. That's where it comes from. Now, I'm getting a little nervous about the maiden on my first ever flight controlled airplane, but I'm beginning to see more and more that probably shouldn't do it in manual mode. But again, when I went into fly-by-wire A last night and saw that the throws go right back to these huge throws, and I know they'll be modified, as even if I slam the stick fully to the right, I see now that I'll go no more than like 20, 25 degrees, or 45 actually on the roll. On the pitch, I'll go plus 20 or minus 25, I see now in the software. I've never been exposed to that before. I never threw the Bixler into the air. We have a lot of trout streams around here too. We're in the mountains. There's something like 4,000 miles of trout streams around here. Sorry, I get sidetracked easily. But I understand just general knowledge and understanding that even in fly-by-wire A mode, where those throws are gotten back large again, as the plane rotates right or left, those ailerons are going to calm down and try to go to center at like 20, 25 degrees. Excuse me. So I'm learning, and I never throw anybody's suggestion away. or ignore them. I just don't do that. That would be stupid. Um, so this just a little video trying to explain to people my desire. Now, yes, I want to do aerobatics. I will do a lot of aerobatics. I think the mini Talon, now that I've got the battery sort of secured with some foam. Uh, well, I knew I had to do that because I know my butt's going to try to do some whip stalls. Well, probably a whip stall wouldn't be good in this the way the battery is, but hammerhead turn, loop will be easy. Barrel rolls probably be easy. Probably should stay away from the whip stalls. That could jerk the battery around badly. Hammerhead turns are really cool. But aside from aerobatics, I do want to fly this manually badly. It's one of my biggest desires because that's pure RC flight to me. It's historically all there was. Uh, but I'm beginning to see more and more that probably on the maiden I need to do fly by wire A. And soon after, go ahead and test return to home and let it circle above. I can tell from the way the uh, platform acts on the bench that I think I've got everything set up pretty well, and I think it's going to react pretty well. So I'm not so afraid of a controlled mode as I was. Uh, I haven't fully made the decision, but I'm like 75% uh, sure it's not going to be a manual maiden. I have learned, I have grown. My opinion has been changed by people with more experience than I. Um, kind of feel bad about recommending to other people they do it exactly by the book. I do think with my rates that I set and the expo I have set up, that manual mode might be a little better. And I do have actual flying experience in real airplanes, so I think my possibilities might be, wouldn't say better than others for manual flight, but I think I've got a pretty good manual flight possibility. We'll see. So I just wanted to kind of tamp down everybody thinking that I would be screwing up in manual mode. Uh, and again, I don't think I'm quite going to be making it in manual mode as I expected. Again, the full decision hasn't been made. So this was just a general FYI video trying to tell people, no, I never ignore what I'm told. Uh, I don't want to turn this thing into foam snow. I want it to be around for years. I know it probably won't be, but and I'm still won't lie. I'm getting nervous about the maiden, and I'm sure my adrenaline will be crazy Sunday. Hope I don't have a heart attack because of it. M68 already had triple heart bypass 22 years ago, 21 years ago or so, and this is going to be quite the maiden for me. All right, that's just my crazy banner. Take it with a grain of salt, but please understand, I fully appreciate every tidbit of information anybody has helped me with, given to me, and none of it has been thrown out the window, even if on the face of it I had different thoughts. Uh, I never, ever will do that. Okay. Wow, that's cool. Visiting Asheville. It's like Brooklyn, but cooler. Asheville's a pretty cool place. All right, guys. Thank you so much for everything.